Welcome to Cozy Sleep Haven. Wind down, cuddle up, and let's get cozy. Tonight's episode brings you into the tranquil world of Grace, Havenport's serene meditation studio owner. Together we'll join Grace on a rainy day in Havenport, beginning with a peaceful guided meditation in her studio. Then we'll follow her through the town's rain-dappled streets to Ivy's tea shop, where warmth, friendship, and thoughtful conversation unfold over perfectly steeped cups of tea. Here at Cozy Sleep Haven, we celebrate the quiet magic of life's simplest pleasures, the steady rhythm of rain, the comforting aroma of tea, and the gentle connections that bring us peace. Our community of cozy connoisseurs, just like you, cherishes these moments that help ease us into rest. We hope you'll return to meet more charming characters and explore new sleepy stories from Havenport. For now, let's join Grace as she leads us into stillness and relaxation. So wind down, snuggle up, and let's get cozy.
Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Before we begin, take a moment to settle into your space, wherever that may be. Adjust yourself until you feel supported and comfortable. And when you're ready, let your eyes gently close. Outside, the rain falls softly, a steady rhythm against the windows of our studio here in Havenport. Can you hear it? Let its gentle pattern become your focus, as if the rain itself is inviting you into this moment. Take a deep breath in. Feel the air filling your lungs, expanding your chest. Now slowly let it out, releasing any tension you may be carrying. With each breath, let your body settle further, finding its natural rhythm, steady and calm, just like the rain. Now I want you to imagine yourself sitting beneath a great ancient tree. Its wide branches stretch above you, creating a canopy that shields you from the rain. You're safe here, cocooned in this peaceful space. The ground beneath you is firm and grounding, the earth cool and steady beneath your hands. Around you, the rain falls in soft whispers, its droplets nourishing the world in quiet persistence. As you sit under the tree, feel the rain washing over everything in your mind, clearing away distractions, rinsing away the worries of the day. Each drop carries away something you no longer need, leaving you lighter, calmer, and more present. Let your breathing slow even further. Inhale deeply, taking in the stillness around you. Exhale fully, letting that stillness flow through you. Imagine that with every breath, you're becoming more like the tree, rooted, steady, unshaken by the rain. You don't need to move. You don't need to do anything at all. Simply be. Now notice how the rain falls without hesitation. It doesn't rush or force itself to the ground. It simply follows its path, drop by drop. Think about how, like the rain, you don't need to have all the answers at once. You can take your time, moment by moment, trusting in life's natural rhythm. Let yourself rest here for a while, feeling the peace that comes with stillness, the beauty in just being. And when you're ready, bring your awareness back to the present. You might wiggle your fingers or your toes, letting the sensation of movement return slowly. Take one last deep breath, and as you exhale, let your eyes open. The rain is still falling softly outside, its rhythm unchanged. Carry this sense of calm with you into whatever lies ahead.
Grace opened her eyes, her serene smile matching the tranquility of the room. Around her, participants began to stir, their faces peaceful, their movements unhurried. Outside, the rain continued its steady cadence, a soothing reminder of the meditation they had just shared. Grace rose gracefully from her cushion, preparing to step into the rainy Havenport morning, ready to carry the stillness of the studio with her. Grace stepped out of the studio, her umbrella snapping open with a soft click as she faced the gentle drizzle outside. The rain greeted her like an old friend, its cool touch brushing against her cheeks. She paused for a moment on the threshold, taking in the familiar sights of Havenport. The town felt alive in the rain, though quieter. Cobblestone streets glistened with puddles, and shop fronts cast warm, inviting light onto the damp sidewalks. She walked with unhurried steps, the steady patter of rain against her umbrella creating a soothing rhythm. Each step splashed softly on the wet ground, and the scent of rain-soaked earth mingled with the briny tang of the sea just beyond the town. Grace found herself savoring the walk, each moment a continuation of the stillness she'd cultivated in the studio. As she passed the bakery, the faint aroma of fresh bread and pastries wafted out, mingling with the scent of the rain. Sam, the cheerful baker, waved at her through the foggy window, his hands dusted with flour. Grace returned the wave, her smile warm. Havenport was a town of connections, and even on a rainy day, its charm was impossible to miss. She made her way toward Ivy's tea shop, the familiar sign of Ivy's teas and treats swaying slightly in the breeze. The shop's windows glowed softly, offering a promise of warmth and comfort. Grace's thoughts drifted to Ivy, her calming presence, her knack for creating the perfect cup of tea, and the conversations that always seemed to flow effortlessly between them. The rain intensified briefly, a heavier patter that caused Grace to tighten her grip on the umbrella. She didn't mind, though. The rain felt cleansing, like it was washing away the remnants of the morning, preparing her for the cozy reprieve that awaited her inside the tea shop. By the time she reached the door, her boots were glistening with water, and the cool air had painted a faint flush on her cheeks. Grace tucked her umbrella closed, shaking off the excess droplets, and pushed the door open. A small bell above chimed softly, announcing her arrival. The warmth hit her immediately, wrapping around her like a comforting hug. Inside, the tea shop was a haven from the rain, its cozy ambience inviting her to stay as long as she pleased. Ivy looked up from behind the counter, her bright eyes lighting up as she saw Grace. "Perfect day for tea, isn't it?" Ivy said, her voice carrying its usual cheerful lilt. Grace smiled, brushing a strand of damp hair behind her ear. "I don't think there's a better day for it." Ivy motioned toward a table near the window, already pulling out a selection of teas. "Sit down and I'll make us something warm. I have a feeling you'll love what I've been working on." Grace settled into her seat, the sound of rain against the window blending seamlessly with the gentle clatter of Ivy's preparations. Grace let herself sink into the comfort of the tea shop, her body relaxing as the warmth from the small fireplace in the corner began to chase away the chill of the rainy walk. The air was rich with the mingling aromas of steeping teas, freshly baked scones, and the faint sweetness of honey. Shelves lined with colorful tea tins, jars of herbs, and delicate pottery created a vibrant yet soothing mosaic. Each corner of the shop seemed curated to invite stillness and delight. Her gaze drifted to the window beside her table, where rivulets of rain ran down the glass, distorting the view of the cobblestone streets outside. It was a perfect spot to watch the world slow down the rain blurring the sharp edges of the town into soft watercolor strokes. Grace felt her breathing naturally deepen, in sync with the gentle rhythm of the rain. Behind the counter, Ivy moved with practiced ease, her movements light and purposeful. Her bright red hair was pinned loosely at the back of her head, and she wore an apron adorned with a whimsical print of tiny teapots and flowers. She hummed softly to herself as she gathered ingredients, her cheerful demeanor matching the cozy energy of the shop. Grace's eyes roamed the room, taking in the little details that made Ivy's tea shop such a special place. A chalkboard above the counter listed today's specials in Ivy's looping handwriting. Lavender Earl Grey latte, rainy day chai, and a lemon honey rooibos. Small vases on each table held sprigs of fresh herbs, rosemary, mint, and thyme, adding an earthy, natural touch. Ivy approached Grace's table, holding a tray with a teapot and 2 delicate cups. She set them down carefully, her smile warm. "I thought we'd start with something grounding," she said, pouring the tea. "This is my rainy day chai. It's a blend I've been working on. A little spicy, a little sweet, with just a hint of citrus." As Ivy poured, the steam from the tea swirled upward, carrying a comforting aroma of cinnamon, cardamom, and orange peel. Grace wrapped her hands around the warm cup, letting its heat seep into her fingers. She took a slow sip, savoring the blend's rich, complex flavors. It was as if Ivy had captured the essence of a rainy day and infused it into the tea. "This is wonderful," Grace said softly, her eyes meeting Ivy's. "It feels like it was made for a day like today." Ivy laughed, her expression lighting up. "That's exactly what I hoped for. Rainy days deserve a tea that feels like a hug." The 2 women sat quietly for a moment, listening to the rain tap against the windows. The shop's soft, golden light created an almost magical glow, blending with the gentle murmur of the rain outside. Grace felt a wave of gratitude for this simple, perfect moment. A pause in the day where time seemed to stretch and slow, offering space for connection and calm. Ivy leaned back in her chair for a moment, her hands resting lightly on the edge of the table. "I have a feeling today calls for a little exploration," she said, her tone playful. "Let me make something special for you." Grace smiled, watching as Ivy stood and returned to the counter. The sound of glass jars being opened, tea leaves rustling, and water boiling filled the shop, blending seamlessly with the rain outside. Ivy moved with a quiet confidence, her hands deftly measuring out a mix of loose tea leaves, spices, and dried herbs. "This blend is a favorite of mine," Ivy said over her shoulder, her voice carrying across the cozy space. "It's a rooibos base, so it's naturally caffeine-free. I've added dried orange peel, a touch of ginger, and just a hint of vanilla. I call it sunshine after rain. It's meant to brighten even the gloomiest days." Grace leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table as she listened. She had always admired Ivy's ability to turn tea into something more than just a drink. For Ivy, tea was an experience, a ritual of care and intention. The shop filled with the soft whistle of the kettle, followed by the sound of water pouring over the tea. Ivy let the leaves steep, watching the liquid transform into a rich, amber hue. She added a splash of frothy oat milk to the teapot, swirling it gently until the tea lightened to a warm golden color. "It's all about balance," Ivy said as she worked. "You want the citrus to be bright, but not overpowering. The ginger to add warmth, but not too much bite. Every ingredient has its role, just like the rain today. It might seem like it's just there to soak everything, but really, it's nourishing the world." Grace found herself smiling, drawn in by Ivy's reflections. There was something calming about watching someone pour so much care into a simple act. The sounds, the gentle clinking of the spoon against the cup, the soft pour of the tea, felt meditative in their own way. Ivy carried the tray back to the table, placing a steaming teacup in front of Grace. "Here we are," she said, her voice warm with pride. "Let me know what you think." Grace lifted the cup, the warmth radiating through her hands. She took a slow sip, letting the flavors unfold on her tongue. The tea was smooth and comforting, the bright notes of orange, and the warmth of ginger perfectly balanced by the creamy vanilla. It was, as Ivy had promised, like a ray of sunshine breaking through the clouds. "This is incredible," Grace said softly. "It's exactly what I needed." Ivy grinned, settling back into her seat with her own cup. That's the magic of tea. It has a way of giving us what we don't even know we're looking for. The two women sat in companionable silence, sipping their tea and listening to the rain, as though the world outside had paused just for them. Grace cradled her cup in her hands, savoring the gentle warmth that seeped into her fingers. The rain outside continued its steady cadence, a calming backdrop to the quiet moment. Ivy took a sip from her own cup, her expression soft as she gazed out the window at the rain-soaked streets of Havenport. "There's something about rain that always feels nostalgic," Ivy said, breaking the silence. Her voice was reflective, almost wistful. "It reminds me of lazy afternoons at my grandmother's house. She'd make tea, and we'd sit on the porch just listening to the rain. We didn't even talk much. It was just peaceful." Grace nodded, her lips curving into a gentle smile. Rain does have a way of slowing everything down, doesn't it? It's like it gives us permission to pause. Ivy's eyes brightened, and she leaned forward slightly. "Exactly. There's this wonderful simplicity to it, like the whole world is being rinsed clean." Grace chuckled softly. "It's funny you say that. During the meditation session this morning, I used the rain as a metaphor for letting go, washing away what no longer serves us." "That's beautiful," Ivy said, her smile widening. "It makes sense. Rain has this dual nature, doesn't it? It's soft, but it's also powerful. It can wear down mountains if given enough time." Grace tilted her head thoughtfully. "I like that. It's a good reminder that even small, consistent efforts, like rain, can create change." The two women sat quietly for a moment, letting the conversation settle. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows, filling the space between their words. Grace took another sip of her tea, her thoughts drifting. "When I was a kid," she began, "I used to love rainy days because it meant staying inside and reading. I'd build a fort out of blankets and pillows, curl up with a stack of books, and lose myself for hours." Ivy laughed, her cheeks dimpling. "That sounds magical. I used to do something similar, but I'd draw instead. Rain always made me feel more creative, like the world outside was inspiring me somehow." Grace's eyes lit up. "I think it still does. You've managed to capture the essence of a rainy day in this tea." Ivy placed her hand over her heart in mock gratitude. "Why, thank you. I do try." They both laughed softly, their voices blending with the rain's gentle murmur. The sound of footsteps on the cobblestones outside briefly caught their attention, but the figure quickly disappeared into the mist. Havenport felt cocooned by the rain, its usual bustle replaced with a quiet serenity. Ivy leaned back in her chair, her gaze returning to the window. "You know," she said, her voice softer now, "I think rainy days are nature's way of telling us to slow down, to just be present. It's like the world is whispering, 'Take your time.'" Grace nodded, her expression thoughtful. "And we should listen." Ivy reached for the tray on the table, lifting the now empty teapot with a decisive flourish. "I think it's time for round 2, she said, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Let's mix things up a bit." Grace chuckled, leaning back in her chair. "What do you have in mind?" "Well," Ivy began as she carried the tray back to the counter, "you've had my rainy day chai, and we explored the sunshine in a cup rooibos. How about a comparison of sorts? Tea versus coffee?" Grace raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "I wasn't expecting a showdown today." "It's not a competition," Ivy said with a playful shrug. "But they have such different energies, don't they? Tea is gentle, soothing, like the rain outside. Coffee, though, it's bold, energizing, like a thunderstorm rolling in." Grace laughed. "You make it sound so dramatic." "That's because it is," Ivy teased. "But let me show you what I mean." She began preparing a pour-over coffee for herself, explaining each step as she worked. "You start with fresh beans. These are Ethiopian, with a bright, fruity flavor. The grind has to be just right. Not too fine, not too coarse. Then you pour the water slowly, in circles, letting it bloom." The aroma of the coffee began to fill the shop, rich and inviting, mingling with the lingering sense of tea and rain. Grace watched Ivy's precise movements, fascinated by the care she poured into even the simplest acts. "It's all about timing and control," Ivy said, her tone thoughtful now. "Coffee demands your attention. It's bold, yes, but it's also deliberate. There's something satisfying about that." Grace nodded, then glanced at the shelves of tea tins behind Ivy. "And tea? What's its story?" Ivy smiled, reaching for a tin of green tea leaves. "Tea asks for patience. It's not about boldness, it's about nuance. Every cup is different depending on how you steep it, how you let it unfold." She prepared a pot of green tea for Grace, the delicate leaves unfurling in the hot water. "This is Essentia," Ivy explained. "It's grassy, a little sweet, with a hint of ocean breeze. Perfect for a rainy day." Grace took the cup Ivy offered her, holding it close to inhale the aroma. It was light and fresh, a stark contrast to the bold richness of the coffee. She took a sip, letting the subtle flavors unfold on her tongue. "It's amazing how different they are," Grace said. "Tea feels like a whisper, while coffee feels like a declaration." "Exactly," Ivy said, settling into her chair with her steaming cup of coffee. "It's like they're two sides of the same coin. One helps you slow down, the other pushes you forward." They sipped their drinks, the contrast between tea and coffee sparking a quiet reflection. The rain outside softened to a gentle drizzle, as though nature itself was savoring the moment, balancing boldness with stillness. The soft drizzle outside the tea shop window seemed to slow even further, the rhythm of each droplet creating an almost hypnotic cadence. Grace and Ivy sat quietly for a while, each lost in their own thoughts, the warmth of their cups cradled between their hands. The rain had a way of making time feel elastic, stretching moments into something more profound. Grace tilted her head, her eyes tracing the meandering paths of raindrops as they raced down the glass. "There's something so meditative about watching the rain," she murmured, her voice soft, almost as if speaking too loudly might disrupt the peace. Ivy nodded, her gaze following Grace's to the window. "It's like the rain is alive, each drop on its own journey. Some linger, others rush, but eventually they all reach the same destination." Grace smiled at the poetic observation. "It's a lot like life, isn't it? Everyone moving at their own pace, but still connected to the same larger rhythm." The rain picked up slightly, its gentle patter now a more insistent tap against the windows. The sound filled the tea shop, wrapping around them like a cocoon. Grace leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. "Rain always feels so cleansing to me, like it's washing away the noise and clutter of the world." Ivy's lips curved into a small, thoughtful smile. "I've always thought of it as a reset button. It's like the rain is reminding us to let go of what doesn't serve us and start fresh. Grace nodded, her expression thoughtful. It's a reminder we don't get often enough. We're so focused on doing, on moving forward, that we forget how valuable it is to just sit still and listen. Ivy gestured to the rain-streaked glass. And rain doesn't ask for our attention, it just happens. You notice it because it's there, persistent but quiet. It doesn't demand anything from you. They fell into a companionable silence again, the only sounds the faint clink of Ivy's teaspoon against her cup and the soft murmur of the rain. Grace let her thoughts drift, her eyes closing briefly as she tuned into the rhythm of the rain. It was almost like the world outside was joining in on a meditation of its own. After a while, Ivy broke the quiet. Do you ever notice how rain makes everything seem softer? The edges of the world blur, the colors deepen, and even the air feels heavier, like it's holding you in place. Grace opened her eyes, her gaze warm as she nodded. It's like the rain encourages us to see things differently, to look more closely at what we might normally overlook. Ivy leaned back, her cup resting on her lap. Sometimes, I think rain is nature's way of slowing us down, of asking us to pay attention. Grace tilted her head, her voice soft and reflective, and to remember that there's beauty in stillness, if we're willing to see it. Ivy rose from her chair, brushing invisible crumbs from her apron. I think we need one more cup to round out this rainy day, she said, her voice carrying the same warmth as the tea shop itself. I have something special, a blend I only bring out when the rain feels this cozy. Grace smiled, intrigued. You've been holding out on me, haven't you? Ivy chuckled as she returned to the counter, pulling a small tin from a high shelf. Maybe just a little. This one's called my rainy day blend. It's earthy, grounding, with hints of chamomile and lemon balm, and just a touch of elderflower to keep it bright. She carefully measured out the tea, her movements deliberate and practiced, as though this ritual was as much for herself as it was for Grace. The gentle hiss of the kettle broke the quiet, followed by the soft splash of water cascading over the leaves. As the tea steeped, a soothing aroma filled the room, a blend of earth and meadow with a whisper of citrus. Grace watched Ivy with quiet appreciation, finding a sense of calm in her friend's methodical movements. There was a meditative quality to the way Ivy worked, as if each step in the tea-making process was a small act of mindfulness. When Ivy returned to the table, she set down 2 cups of the steaming blend, the liquid a warm golden hue. Let me know what you think, she said, her tone playful, but with a hint of genuine anticipation. Grace lifted the cup, inhaling deeply before taking a sip. The flavors unfolded gently, a balance of grounding and lightness, like the rain itself. It's perfect, she said softly, her voice full of gratitude. It tastes like the feeling of being wrapped in a blanket while listening to the rain. Ivy's eyes crinkled with delight. That's exactly what I was going for. They sat quietly for a moment, savoring the tea and the soft hum of the rain. The shop felt like its own little world, separate from the rest of Havenport, where time seemed to stretch and slow. Grace set her cup down and looked at Ivy, her expression thoughtful. You know, I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about rain softening the edges of the world. I think it also softens us, if we let it. It reminds us to be gentler with ourselves. Ivy nodded, her gaze warm, and with each other, rain has a way of washing away what doesn't matter and leaving behind what does. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the rain a steady presence in the background. When Grace finally glanced at the clock, she sighed lightly. I should probably head back before I lose track of the whole day. Ivy smiled, pouring a bit more tea into Grace's cup. "Take your time. The rain will wait for you." Grace smiled back, taking another sip, savoring the warmth of both the tea and the moment. Grace stepped out of Ivy's tea shop, her umbrella snapping open as she met the gentle drizzle that had blanketed Havenport throughout the day. The scent of rain-washed earth and the faint tang of the sea greeted her, wrapping around her like an old friend. The air was cool, but not cold, and the steady rhythm of the rain felt like an extension of the warmth she'd just experienced inside. She paused on the threshold, looking back at the tea shop. Through the rain-slicked window, she could see Ivy bustling behind the counter, her bright red hair catching the golden glow of the shop's lights. Grace smiled to herself, her heart feeling light, as though the tea and conversation had washed away more than just the day's cares. The cobblestones beneath her boots were slick, reflecting the warm glow of street lamps like tiny pools of light. She took her time as she walked, letting the rain's steady patter guide her pace. Each step felt deliberate, her breathing still calm and steady, echoing the stillness she'd cultivated during the meditation earlier in the day. Havenport was quiet now, its usual hum softened by the rain. The shops lining the street had drawn their curtains, their interiors glowing softly with light, while an occasional umbrella-wielding passerby offered a polite nod in her direction. The rain seemed to wrap the town in a kind of cocoon, its presence unifying, calming. Grace's thoughts wandered as she walked. She reflected on the peaceful simplicity of the day, from the meditation session to the warmth of Ivy's tea shop. It struck her how rare these moments of quiet connection were, both with herself and others. The rain had a way of amplifying those feelings, reminding her of the beauty in simply being present. She stopped for a moment by the harbor, drawn by the sight of the lighthouse standing sentinel at the edge of the shore. Its beam cut through the misty rain, steady and unwavering, a symbol of guidance and constancy. The waves lapped gently at the rocks below, their rhythm mirroring the rain's quiet song. Grace took a deep breath, letting the salty air fill her lungs. The walk home felt like an extension of the day's meditation, each step grounding her, each breath a reminder of the stillness she sought to carry forward. The rain's touch was gentle on her umbrella, a rhythmic presence that seemed to say, "Keep going, take your time." As she reached her front door, Grace paused once more, taking in the rain-soaked world around her. There was something so comforting about the constancy of it, the way it fell without hesitation, nourishing everything it touched. She folded her umbrella and stepped inside, her home warm and inviting, the smell of rain lingering faintly on her coat. She set her umbrella aside and brewed herself one final cup of tea, letting the stillness of the day settle fully within her. The rain outside continued its steady cadence, a reminder of the peace that could always be found if she only paused to listen.
Thank you.